know the immigration climate is a little bit unpredictable at the moment, so we have our resident RCIC Sumanpreet Singh here with us today to talk about the immigration changes and what the future is going to look like for Canadian business owners. Sumanpreet, welcome to the KenPR podcast.
Thank you.
Can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Yes, my name is Sumanpreet Singh and I've been a RCIC for about 3 years now. I have a long tech background and I potentially jumped into immigration because I found it to be a good switch and lack of transparent RCIC that exists currently in the space.
So what is your experience as an RCIC? What are some things that you've dealt with and what made you kind of stick?
Right. So I think the Canadian landscape, immigration landscape, especially struggling through multiple phases where there's a lot of immigration consultants, but there's a lot of ghost consultants as well. So we are trying to, why I entered is to essentially try to eliminate that parameter and bring a lot more accountability and transparency to the industry itself. That's what drove me to join.
All right. So can you give me a rundown of the recent immigration changes?
For sure, there's been a ton of them. In the last 6 months or a year, there's been changes in the low wage LMIs that we have very recently seen on the 26th of September, where now we have reduced caps for F&B, especially food and beverages. And we have still sectors like healthcare, STEM, and other occupations like construction, where we are still kind of essentially going towards a direction where the government wants these occupations to be a part of their workforce, and that's why we have higher capping in those. But these changes will definitely impact a lot of temporary foreign workers.
Yeah. So in terms of low wage LMIA, student capping, what's going on with that?
Right. So student capping and low wage LMIAs both are essentially targeting the temporary foreign workforce or potential temporary foreign workforce through students. And why that is happening, as I said, the earlier government did not mind multiple positions to be active or multiple occupations to be fine and letting people allow to get their PR pathway through that. But now, if you look at the landscape of even the PR or express entry, right, we are seeing STEM draws, we are seeing category-based draws. So the government essentially both on a provincial as well as a federal level has kind of decided to target very specific occupations, and that's what they're heading towards. People who are not in these occupations are going to find it challenging, which we see in CanPR too, that a lot of the people's who are permits are expiring who are PGWPs.
Right.
And a lot of students, as we see comparison to the next plan that Mark Miller has presented, I would say it's as it says in the public policy, it's a 10% drop comparative to 2024 in the next coming 2 years.
Yeah.
Right? So that drop will essentially kind of hit a lot more on the sentiment towards Canadian immigration, which personally I feel has gone a bit more toward the negative direction considering all these stringent changes.
Right. So we'll touch on why you think that's negative a little bit later.
Sure.
But for now, I think I just want to know what challenges you think Canadian businesses are going to face. What are some things that they should know going forward?
Right. I think these changes, especially for temporary foreign workers who are a backbone of the labor market, now are going to impact the Canadian labor market even more, where Canadian businesses, especially and business owners, are going to find it harder to find resources in these specific spaces even because of the general sentiment. I believe even stock markets or any other market primarily runs on sentiment. And if we see the sentiment is going in the reversal direction, it might be challenging for Canadian businesses to hire locally. So they will have to go to other routes or hiring internationally or trying to find other ways of offering remote work maybe. And that's where the direction I feel is going for, a challenging direction for Canadian businesses. But if you look at on the positive side of things, the STEM draws, the healthcare, the construction, all these fields are going to see a boom of workforce coming into the country because Canada wants to attract that, right? All the provinces want to attract that.
Right.
That's where we're heading, I feel, from a Canadian business standpoint.
Right. And what do you feel are the pros and cons of these recent IRCC changes? Because I feel like people are seeing it in more of a negative light.
Yeah.
So I think if they were able to see it in a positive light, then you know, because there are business owners that are in the food industry
Right.
that have been relying on temporary foreign workers to, you know, hire their workforce.
Right.
But now they won't have that option readily available. They just have to rely on Canadians, which is great. But a lot of, like, you know, there are temporary foreign workers that were readily available.
Yeah.
So how do you feel that these changes is a pro for those businesses?
Right.
How do you feel it's a con for those businesses?
Right. So if we talk about pros and cons specifically for Canadian businesses and industry specifically, just to give you an example of the healthcare space, even before these changes, the healthcare sector, especially in provinces like New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, have initiated programs which make it much more easier for registered nurses, licensed nurses, to get their licensure equated to the Canadian education system, essentially, or the Canadian equivalency of being a registered nurse. So they have made it easier. And on top of that, all of these provinces now specifically do their hiring events internationally, directly reaching out to the candidates itself. So it's not like the government is making it stringent on us to hire locally or internationally. They are making efforts, but all those, again, efforts are kind of directed toward very specific occupation, right?
Okay.
And if you look at the cons of it, essentially the food and beverage space will take a hit, because I feel that due to this low capping of 10% in the low wage, especially pizza cooks, any kind of cook, chefs that are coming into the picture, food service supervisors, these applications won't be any more possible for a lot of small businesses.
Right.
And when I say small businesses, I would say maybe businesses that are under $1 million or under 500,000, they would find it really hard to find local talent. And even if they do, they will only retain them until their postgraduate work permit expires. And they won't be able to retain them based on an LMIA or something like that, which is where the new capping brings in. But if you look at 2024 data, I would say maybe cook and food service supervisor and office admins, which are very maybe not required jobs to Canada anymore, they were in the top 10 list though, right?
But these jobs are so readily available. There's so many of them.
Yeah.
I saw a statistic that there's like 50,000 jobs in Canada.
Right.
For like service workers, admins, like all of these like low wage jobs.
Right.
Who's gonna fill these jobs now, right? Because Canadians weren't working them before, and the temporary foreign workers filled these jobs.
Right.
So now that these resources aren't available,
Yeah.
what is your prediction for that?
Another aspect that we didn't talk about is Francophone immigration, where the government again shows a very strong intention to bring Francophones into the country, may it be Quebec, may it be the rest of Canada, because the draws in comparison to what we see in the CRS score is much lower right now. And along with that, there's other options that business owners can explore. For example, under CUSMA, which is a treaty between US, Mexico, and Canada, you can bring in workers. I'm not entirely sure if you can bring these particular occupations, but you can still bring in workers without an LMIA or an LMIA exempt scenario. Similar for Francophones, these are also LMIA exempt situations, right?
Right.
And this is another avenue where I feel a lot of influx of external international recruitment will happen.
Okay. I can see that happening. That's interesting though. Like, it's gonna be like a lot of changes are happening, so I can see why people are scared. But like you said before, more targeted fields are required. Healthcare, PSWs.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, construction, that kind of thing. So, kind of segueing off of that, what are your predictions then for the future, like for the immigration future of Canada? You did kind of touch on this, but just if you can give like a concrete, like couple of words where you think it's headed.
I think like the Canadian economy does heavily rely on the incoming or incumbent immigrants that are either part of the economy already in a temporary environment, or they're coming from their direct PRs or stuff like that. So the future still looks bright. We are seeing recent changes, but this is not the first time that immigration has gotten a bit stringent.
Yeah.
I think it'll again open up, allow people to extend their permits and stuff like that. This is very clear that this government wants to retain everybody that is already inside, based on multiple public policies that they did even through COVID, right? And we hope that the government also does similar in terms of public policies in the coming future as well. So the future looks bright in my understanding. Even you look at the plans for 2025 or 2026, there hasn't been much changes there, but we'll see a new update on that in November when Mark Miller decides to kind of update that plan, and that will give us a lot more clear picture as to where we are heading. But I don't think it's going to be a 50% hit, maybe it'll be a 5 or 10% hit on the quotas that we want to bring in from external countries or stuff like that. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Sumanpreet. We are going to be doing podcasts with Sumanpreet regularly. So if you have any questions you want to ask in RCIC, you can either join our webinar or you can ask questions, DM us, and we can talk about it in our next podcast. All right. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.